This is the Web Platform Podcast, episode number 42. Today we're going to learn about social engineering. On our panel is Danny Blue.
Hey, everybody.
And me, Eric Isaacson. And our guest today is Chris Hadnagy, who is at Human Hacker on Twitter. How are you doing, Chris?
Yo, hey guys, how's it going?
Pretty good. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my official title is Chief Human Hacker of Social Engineer Incorporated. That is actually the name of the company. I get paid to hack the human networks and organizations to tell them their vulnerabilities so we can fix them before the real bad guys come in.
I think you might have the best job title of anyone we've had on the podcast so far.
I get that all the time, but my business card actually says Chief Human Hacker.
That sounds fantastic.
And I do. I enjoy it.
Your bio on social-engineer.com also has it as well.
Thank you.
So, can you tell us, what is social engineering? Is this like something out there like a Twitter or a Facebook? What is this thing here?
So, I define it really broad in general. I define it as any act that influences a person to take an action that may or may not be in their best interest. And I give a really broad definition because I don't think it's always negative. Sometimes we use social engineering, the same exact principles. Like if you have kids, I always tell this example. I have a daughter, and if you had asked me 12, 15 years ago, do you ever see yourself, wearing a pink scarf and having a tea party, the answer would have been no. But my daughter got me to do just that. So she has influenced me to take an action that I wouldn't normally take. Now, when you look at the psychology behind that, the same exact way that she got me to do that is the way that bad guys get us to click links or give our credit card information. It's just a different intent and purpose. So we have a broad definition because it's good and bad.
It sounds a lot like marketing.
Actually, marketing is a great example of social engineering when it's done right, because you look at a product, it influences you to think about that product, and then when you go out to the store and you see it, you're like, you might not physically think this, but I remember that commercial. I'm going to try that, and then we end up buying products based solely on what somebody on a television set said.
Now, if you look at social engineering and the definitions for it, they seem to vary. I know on social-engineer.org, which is your informational site, not the company site, you have a lot of good information on there, and you have a video in the beginning of the opening page that talks about lots of different words that are associated with that, like pretexting, rapport. There's info gathering, body language, manipulation, profiling, facial expressions. I mean, is there really that much to this?
There is. If you think about just defining what it takes to influence a person, you have to know what motivates that person and how that person makes a decision. So it's very much like marketing, like what you just said. So marketers have to know, well, what is it going to take to make a person buy this piece of clothing or this soft drink or whatever the product is, and then they put that in front of you. Well, a social engineer has to know that same thing. So what is it that's going to influence you to take this action? Is it using empathy and sadness? Is it a certain type of ask? Is it cross-gender that will get you to be influenced? Is it the motivation to help other people, or is it greed or fear? And understanding what it takes to make a person take that action is then it motivates the person to basically form their attack based on that. So understanding how a person thinks, what influences them, and what makes them take that action is essential to social engineering, and that's why all those pieces are listed there.
You used a word in there that kind of, when I first heard this, because I've heard you talk about it a lot on your own podcast, the socialengineer.org podcast, attack and target. So these two terms. So a lot of people, when they think of social engineering, they think of the hacker in the corner room with all the servers around him in the dark, typing on this, the Linux computer and doing all this crazy stuff on the command line. But there's another side to that, right? Because you do this, you do it professionally. You don't do that, right? You're not that bad guy. Nope. You're a good guy, hopefully.
Yeah, I am.
So I mean, there's that when we use those terms like target or we use attack, we're really just trying to say that this is what bad guys will try to do, and there's countermeasures to that, and there's things that you can do to avoid that. Are there things that developers should really think about while they're at work, while they're at home even, to prevent such type of things to happen?
Well, when it comes to developers, there's a few different areas that could be affected by social engineering. So first, we talk about secure coding practices. These are difficult, I think, for a lot of developers because they take more time and effort and energy and a lot of times more money. And you're under a deadline. We've talked to a lot of companies who develop software. We work with them, and they're told, this product's got to be released by X date. We got to get it out there. And you have this, secure coding practice over here, which will take this long, and then you have the practice here, which will take this long, and it's like a crapshoot. If I release this, then maybe we won't get breached. Maybe it will be okay. So, we take the risk. So secure coding practices are definitely important. But even more than that, we talk to people who develop websites and who work in the security of that. And let's think about some of the attacks that occurred in the last 2 years. There's a group called UG Nazi. They attacked a company called WHMCS, and they were able to access the database administrator's account and download all the credit card data and then format all their servers. And how did they do it? It was 2 phone calls. And the reason they were able to do it is they profiled the database administrator after they called in to get his name. Then they profiled him. Then they called back and reset his password by answering the security questions. And the security questions were things that were on his blogs, on his Facebook, on his Twitter accounts. What's the name of your dog? What's the name of your car? What kind of car do you drive? What's your mother's maiden name? All these things are usually public information. So we tell developers, think through these things. When you use security protocols like that and you make them something that easy, then people can profile you and use that to gain access to your accounts.
And then what you talked about before, just secure coding practices that can be more expensive up front, but if you are breached, if something does go wrong, it's exponentially more expensive, both just especially if you're a very public company. So you look at all of the stuff that Anonymous has been doing. So all the problems Sony's been having, because even a couple of years they took down the entire PlayStation network. That was an absolute mess for them. And they're a big company who you would assume is trying to do a pretty good job with security.
Well, we make those assumptions, but let's honestly think about it. Look at Target. Target had one of the biggest breaches, right? Besides, let's say, Anthem or Heartland. But let's just look at Target. Target gets breached, and 70 million people's accounts and credit card numbers are being sold on the dark web. Does Target suffer? Their stock went up a month later. People didn't stop shopping at Target. Do you know anyone who said, I'm never going to Target ever again? Maybe there's the one conspiracy theorist, that will say that, but most people have continued to shop at Target, continued to use their credit cards and debit cards at Target, and continue to go there. Target didn't suffer. Who suffered was the 70 million people that were in their databases that have their credit cards and identities being sold on the dark web. So until there's some kind of sanctions or policies or something from the government that make companies who get breached because of failure to comply with normal security practices, unless there's some fines for that or sanctions for that, these companies don't suffer, so there's no motivation, right? If you tell me, and think about it from a very layman standpoint. I don't know if in your state if you have a car inspection, but in my state I have an inspection for my car, and I know that if I don't get that inspection and I get pulled over, I'm going to pay probably a $120 fine for failing to go get a $30 inspection. So I go, even though my car's brand new, I know it has no issues. I go and I pay some mechanic to slap a sticker on there for $30 to avoid the $120 fine for when I get caught, if I get caught. And these companies don't have that. They don't have the, hey, you got to go, you must get mandate to get real security test. You must, or if we catch you getting breached, you're going to get fined this much. That doesn't occur. So, companies like Target, Anthem is still selling health insurance. Right? One of the biggest breaches. Heartland still accepting credit card payments, and one of the biggest breaches in U.S. history. And these companies don't suffer. So I hear what I said and I hear what you're saying, but secure coding practices, it puts all this pressure on the developers, but at the end of the day, it's the companies who are pushing them to get this stuff done quicker.
So is it is it a policy solution? Like is it a law that needs to get passed for something like that?
That's a hard one, because I'll give you a good example. PCI is a law, and PCI compliance. If you take credit cards and you're a major company, you have to have a PCI compliant pen test once a year, and that's a good law, and it forces companies to get their PCI servers and their credit card policies checked once a year, and that's very good. But what happens a lot of times is now you have these companies popping out of the woodwork that do PCI compliant checks. So they run a scanner, and the company can put a checkbox next to "We got our PCI compliant test," but it was nothing more than a than a vulnerability scan. So it's a two-way street, right? You can make a law, but then on the other hand, you have to have companies that actually care enough about security. Sony was breached. This is the fourth time. They were taken out by Anonymous like 28 times in 30 days or something. Then they were breached again, and now they were breached this time. And you look and you say, wait, the accounting password was Sony accounting? So the first 38 breaches that you experienced, you didn't realize that a password Sony accounting was a bad password? But what is it going to take for you? He's going to spew. But what's it going to take for for Sony to go, oh, maybe I should have more critical passwords for my infrastructure than Sony accounting?
And also, what?
Yeah, it's ridiculous when you see what they used for passwords. And again, they didn't suffer. Did we stop buying PlayStations? Did we stop seeing Sony movies? We didn't. Who suffered is the employees of that company who had their information now being passed around the dark web.
That's rough. I mean, we could veer off onto just password security as well.
Yes.
for a while, because especially when you look at certain, say so you'll go into something and be like, your password has to be this long, and it has to have this many characters, and it has to have this. You can't have this many characters in a row, and all these different types of things. And the password ends up being so convoluted that you can't remember it.
Yeah.
So you have to write it down, or you have to store it somewhere on your computer where someone then has access to it. And I think it was
your phone.
Yeah, or on your phone, which you carry around with you everywhere.
That's terrible.
But what a lot of people, I can't remember, like I've read articles about it, I can't put any names to it, but just the idea of these like passphrases instead, things that are easy for you to remember but are difficult for a computer to guess, and something that you don't have to write down. Like if you just look around the room and you're like, owl mask, Sackboy table. Like you could probably remember that. It's long, and it's probably fairly difficult for a computer to guess, and it has nothing to do with you personally.
Yeah, we tell people that there's password managers that are good. Ones that don't share things on the cloud, don't store things on the internet, and then if you use a password manager, you have to remember one really long password, but all your other passwords could be stored in there. Because we tell people you have to have a method to do this, because you can't share passwords. It's almost guaranteed your bank is not going to get hacked from the website, but maybe your social media account will. And if you're using the same password on your social media account that you are on your bank, the first thing any hacker will do once they breach your social media account is go and try your bank password, your credit card password, your other on the same password, because many people will pick a good password but then reuse it across 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 websites.
Or slight variations on that password.
Or slight variations like adding a 1 in the end or an exclamation mark. And those are things that crackers can try really easy. Password crackers can try really easy. So we say, use a password manager. That's fine. Just don't store it in plain text on your phone. Don't use your phone at all. I mean, for password storage. I mean, because these things, we leave them everywhere. And they're vulnerable, and if someone picks it up and gets your phone, and the last thing you did was log into your bank account on that, you might as well just start taking your money out of an ATM and passing it out.
Yeah, how do you feel about the two-step authentications that they have, or the three-step ones?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think that this kind of it helps because, let's think about some of these attacks that occurred on celebrities in the last year. So celebrities had a lot of their nude pictures passed around the internet, and one of the reasons it happened, let's say with like Scarlett Johansson or Paris Hilton or some of these others, where it wasn't a hack. The attacker went and I forgot my password, and then their email account said, oh, well, you want to answer your security questions? And the answer was yes, and then it was, what's the name of your dog? And you can go find that out about Paris Hilton anywhere, because she takes her dog everywhere. Where do you live? And you can go find that out on social media. It's weird, silly security questions. They were able to reset their passwords and then log in, go to their sent folders, and find all these nude pictures they sent of themselves, and then take them and put them on the internet. Now, if you had two-step auth, then once you got that password, it would text you a code that you're supposed to enter into your box, or email you a code. Well, that would stop an attacker from that. So you may have guessed the security questions, but you still can't log in till you enter this code, and that means an attacker has to have your cell phone and the answer to your security questions. So it's another step they have to have that makes it more difficult.
I do it for almost everything, right?
Yeah.
Especially for social media. I've had, and people like think, well, I'm never going to be hacked, but I am like the most broke person all the time, and people still hack me.
Yeah.
Like I've had my Hotmail account stolen like twice.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky I haven't had my identity stolen. But
well, think about it. It's not about how much money you have in the bank. It could be something as much as your credit. If you may be broke right now, but if you have decent credit, you're a valuable target to an attacker, because a lot of times attackers aren't looking to go empty your present bank account unless you're someone super rich and famous. What they're looking to do is get your credit, because most people don't check their credit reports, and then they buy something, a car, a boat, a house, and they sell it on Craigslist or eBay. So you think about this. I just had a client who got breached, and they bought $100,000 worth of their product and had it shipped to hotels around the U.S., and they went and they found, they got their agents in these hotels, and when the UPS guy came in, they said, oh, hey, is that package for, Chris? Yep, oh, good, I'm here. Sign on it, walk out of the hotel, and that's it. They never can get tracked or traced. Then they go sell those products on eBay or Craigslist, and they make 100% profit. So they're looking to steal product or identity or credit, because what that does is enable them to make a lot more money than stealing the $23.16 you have in your present bank account.
Whoa.
Yeah, sorry, I checked before we started. Sorry.
But that
Nice.
also comes back to Eric said something right when we started about the idea of the hacker sitting in a darkened room in a corner. Most of these hacks, that's not how it works. It's not somebody going, like figuring their way through firewalls and stuff like that. It's people figuring out your passwords.
Yeah, and there was a time where software exploitation was much bigger, and it still does occur. So I'm not trying to diminish it, but let's look at like the Dire Wolf exploit. Dire Wolf's a piece of malware, and the way it's given to you or put on your computer is these attackers have set up literal call centers with dozens and dozens of people in these call centers, and each extension is told, hey, today you're Citibank, extension 2 you're Bank of America, extension 3 you're U.S. Bank. And now what they do is they'll send phishing emails out to people, and they'll put a toll-free number with an extension. Hey, your bank account's having an issue, please call us quickly, toll-free, extension 1. And now it calls, and the person answers, Bank of America, how can I help you? And it sounds legit, and the person on the other end says, I got an email saying my account, oh yes, let me check, type. They hear all the sound, oh yeah, your account. Listen, I'm going to send you an email right now with a piece of software on it. You need to install it, and this will keep you safe from the hackers. And they're getting them to install this malware called Direwolf, and it now runs on the back end, and the attacker can access your computer and watch what you do. They get your real bank login, and they're cleaning companies out. They're taking their money, taking their identities, and it's done over the phone and email. No hacking involved.
And this has been such a long time practice, I think, for hackers. I've heard you talk about it on your show a lot. I know you and Michelle from your podcast. You guys have written a book with someone else, I believe.
Yeah. No, it was just Michelle and I wrote the book, and Robin was the forward.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, Robin Dreek from the
from the FBI. Yep.
So I haven't read that one yet, but this must be you have specific training just for this.
Yeah.
So to a lot of developers, they may think, well, it's just an email. I don't check those emails or anything. What is so detailed that it requires an entire book or a training course in this type of stuff?
Well, right now, if you think about like 6-7 years ago, phishing emails were very easy to spot. You know, it was, I'm Prince Abu from South Africa, and I have $40 million I want to share with you. And if you help me out, I'll give you 10 million of it, kind of thing, you know. And people actually fell for that, but not the majority of people. The majority of people were like, okay, I know this is fake, and they ignored it. But now there is, on the dark web, there's an organization who offers support to malicious phishers who will proofread your email, spell check it, and rewrite it in proper English. And then they'll give you proper branding and logos. So now there's actual 24/7, 365, no joke, 24/7, 365 English-speaking customer support to help you perfect your phishing emails so they're more effective, and they'll even guarantee a raise in click ratio. So the phishers are getting more intelligent and more difficult to spot, which means that as non-attackers, as people who are the victims, we need to get more detailed and more intelligent about how we spot and educate on these same attack vectors.
Yeah, I mean, I had someone call my house, and I tweeted you about this too and said thank you, because I had someone call my house and say to me, hey, we noticed that you're one of the people who were on this server at this time, and it went through some Google router server or something, and you know you're at risk for your computer was infected with something, and we need to fix it. And so the guy on there is like, I need you to get on your computer, and I need you to let me to remote in so I can help you figure out what the problem is. And because I had read your book, your first book, I knew some of these tactics. So I was like, well, let me call you back. I'll look up the number. Don't bother.
Yeah.
What's your extension, right? And the guy is flipping out, like,
yeah.
And he's like, no, I need to get on right now. They're getting very anxious.
Yeah.
And you can really tell from their tone that they're like, why isn't this working?
Yep.
And so I couldn't get their number, but
no, they won't give it.
It's amazing.
You think about it, when they get in. I had a friend, an older friend, who fell for that, and when they log in, the first thing they do is they encrypt your hard drive. So they encrypt your hard drive, then they reboot your computer. When the computer comes up to the boot screen, there's just a message that says, in order to have your computer unlocked, call this number. So they call the number, and it says, to get your computer unlocked, you owe us money, and it will be $200, $300, $500, whatever, and you have to go in Western Union this money to them. When they receive it, they say they'll unlock your computer, but they never do. They'll tell you now they need more money to unlock it, or they'll unlock it, but they'll leave malware on there so they can now watch what you do. And you know, the only thing you can do at that point, you need to junk the computer, format it completely. If you can get back in, wipe it. You lose all your data. Now, if it's grandma and grandpa, they're losing a few pictures of their grandkids. I had this happen to a business client, a school, and the school had this one teacher fall for it. And when she fell for that, they not only encrypted her drive, but any network drive connected to it, because they had the wrong permission set up. And the school lost gigs and gigs and gigs of research and data because of that.
I mean, and now it's just pretty story time, like kind of, because this kind of stuff does happen a lot. I mean, like it's my mother has gotten calls where same type of things, like we're calling from Microsoft. Get on your computer, and then just like for a minute she was like, well, okay, well so far this sounds good, and then they like asked her to open up the command prompt and asking her to give information. And at that point she was like, and very much props to her, she was like, I'm gonna call my son, and I will get, and then I can call you back if something like this checks out, and that was all that there ever was. And I was like, don't talk to those people, Mom.
Yeah.
But
But that's smart. You see, so this is the way, and this is what I tell people: is if you have parents or grandparents, aunts or uncles that are older and they're on the internet, that just tell them that. Don't try to teach them what to do. Tell them that if anybody calls, your simple thing is, I got to call my son, I got to call my nephew, I got to call my brother, whatever it is, I got to call somebody, and then I'll call you back if this is legit. 99% of the attackers will run the other way because they know it's not legit. So, you know, I tell people, just tell your grandparents and parents that, so that way they don't fall for these things.
So for developers and even products and services groups, like the concern is obviously large. You could lose a lot of data. You get a lot of problems happening to you, but how come there's no emphasis on it in the companies? Like I worked at, a few financial companies like I'm at, Deloitte now, and I was at Bloomberg before, and they have, videos that you watch that go through some of this stuff, but it's at a very, very high level.
Yeah.
Okay, don't show your badge even when you're outside, stuff like that you can do. But why isn't there more emphasis and more real world training like you do?
That's a great question, and I tell you, for the last 6 or 7 years, I've been asking companies this question, exactly what you asked, and a lot of times the answers I get back range anywhere from the company saying, "Well, we'll never fall for that. Our people are smarter," to "We're always going to fall for it. So why test?" And everything in between. People who will say, "Well, that's not really an issue. We're worried more about real hackers." But now what's happened in the last, let's say, 16 to 24 months is there has been nonstop story after story after story of these breaches occurring, and it always involving a phishing email or a phone call or a guy walking into your building. And now companies are going, whoa, yeah, we should have probably thought about that. And we are seeing a big increase in companies saying, okay, what do we do? Now, with that, here's the problem. Everybody and their brother has jumped on the bandwagon and said, hey, we can do this. We can do social engineering testing and training. So it's very hard for interested companies to find those of us that do it for real. Right? There's people besides me that do this for real. But every company that does any type of security testing now is a social engineering expert. And the companies that are looking for services have to dig a little deeper. Try to find those that are reputable and that know exactly what they're talking about. And that helps with making these solutions a little bit easier for them to find.
We were talking about car inspections before,
Yeah.
and sometimes it comes down to that same type of thing, that you can go pretty much anywhere and get your car inspected, but there's maybe somebody that you trust that is actually going to be like, okay, there is something actually wrong with your car.
Right.
It's not to code. It needs to get fixed. We'll fix it, and then here you go. But then there'll be the other place that will slap a sticker on it for $5 no matter what, and then there'll be the other place that's going to charge you more to fix something that's not actually a problem that wouldn't actually fail your inspection. So the car inspection analogy I actually think is pretty spot on.
Yeah, it's a really good one because when you're broke and you have the crappy car you don't care about, you go to the guy who just slaps the sticker on. And we hope that if you're listening to this, that's not the way you view your company. If you view your company that way, then yeah, sure, go find the guy who will do the couple $1,000 vulnerability test and put a stamp on it saying you're secure, you're hacker proof. But if you really want to prove that you love your vehicle, you care about your safety, your family, then you take it to the guy that you can trust and is going to do well. I give another analogy I do when I do training all the time, which is, Michelle, like you mentioned before, she works with me. She's big into martial arts. And you think, like when you go to a martial arts class and you step into a ring or a boxing class, you're going to go into a class and you're going to get into a ring with someone who's going to punch you in the face. So what do you want? You want someone, A, that you can trust, right? Because this guy's going to punch you in the face. Second is, if you're preparing for a match, if you're preparing for an actual bout, you don't want, and you're a guy my size, you don't want to have like the 80-pound weakling get in the ring with you because you're not really training. So you need someone who can train and work with you at the weight that you are, at the speed that you are. And it's just like choosing a pen test company. You can't just go and pick the first guy that has a shingle out in his roof that says, pen tester. You got to do a little research. What have you done? What companies do you work with? Do you have referrals? What can you tell us about the way you do it? If you really care about your safety, then you'll take that action very seriously in finding those vendors that can work with you.
I think we're seeing a definite increase in security in general adoption in companies.
Yeah.
We had Gary McGraw from Cigital. He's a CTO there, and he had a lot of really great ideas on security for developers, and a lot of tools that we could use. But there wasn't an emphasis at all on the social engineering aspect that I had heard from that. It is something that they talk about, but not a lot. And so it's interesting that a lot of companies are saying that security is just about pen testing or getting code that's up to par with the standards, so that you don't get XSS attacks or SQL injection or anything like that. There's more emphasis on that because people are uneducated.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm getting to is that when people start getting educated about security and start learning more, not just developers, but our managers, people higher up in the company, and they start to understand why these things are there, that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, if we go back to the inspection analogy, you wouldn't go to your trusted car inspector, have him look at your car, and he says, listen, your brakes aren't going to pass inspection. And you go, okay, and you grab your keys, you get in the car, and you drive away. That's stupid, right? It's unsafe, it's stupid, you're not inspected, and now you're putting your life and other people's life at risk, and your family's life at risk. Well, a company that just gets a vulnerability scan, looks at it and goes, okay, put the check mark, I'm good. It's just like getting back in your car with faulty brakes. You're just basically waiting. You don't know when they're going to fail. Is it going to be a week, a month, 6 months, next year? I don't know. When are you going to get hacked? I can't tell you. But when you know that there's a potential vulnerability, again, not to pick on one company, but you look at Target, and Target knew those POS systems had a potential vulnerability in them. But it's like what we call the ostrich syndrome. Put your head in the sand and hope the tiger doesn't eat you. And it's like you put your head in the sand. If I don't look at the vulnerability, maybe it won't exist. And in the meantime, you're just waiting for if the attack actually occurs. If not, hey, we escaped without having to spend money. And that's usually the thought. It's usually about cash flow. It's a sad thing because again, the end result is 70 million people having their information breached.
Yeah, I also thought too that social engineering, the more I hear you talk about the psychology of it, and there was one episode, I think it was Robin, it could have been somebody else, talking about like how you can pick someone out, a target, like you would say, and you could start conversation cold with them and build a rapport and get these things. So people will do this.
Sure.
And one of the things that episode made me think of was, this is going to sound bad and good, but social engineering can be used as a way for sales and marketing for your company to
all the time
push beyond there and establish that trust earlier on.
Yeah, I get salespeople.
And I don't mean in a bad way. You're not going to sell like broken stuff to people.
No,
but you want them to feel comfortable.
Yep, I get salespeople who come to our course all the time. People who come, sales guys and marketing guys and gals who will come to our course all the time, just to learn those skills. And again, their purpose isn't malicious. They're not going to go out and use it to get someone to buy something crappy. But they're saying, hey, we're going to use these skills to go and to get someone to influence them in a positive way to look at our product and hopefully view it as something that they can purchase. So yeah, those skills are usable in life, not just by malicious attackers, but they're usable in life for communication with your spouse, with your boss, with your kids, with your coworkers, with anyone really. You can use these skills to communicate in a more effective way.
So we've talked about malicious hackers, and we've talked about the type of stuff that you do, where you try to find the vulnerabilities so that people can fill them. Just a bit of terminology. What people probably hear a lot, both like in news stories and all over the place, is the idea of white hat hackers and black hat hackers, which is a very colorful way to describe it. Can you just very, very briefly just go over the main difference between the two?
Sure. So the hats kind of symbolize, like in the old movies, the bad guy always wore black and the good guy always wore white. And that's kind of the concept behind it. Is really the only thing that changes in those two descriptions is intent. So, like, I'm a white hat hacker, which means I know how to do all the bad things, but my intent is never to hurt people, and it's always for companies that hire me to do it. So, let's say like Deloitte, they'll hire me and say, hey, go phish all of our employees to see how vulnerable we are to phishing. I'll do that, but our intent is not to embarrass, humiliate, steal, ruin someone's life, right? Our intent is just to find a vulnerability and help patch the hole. A black hat hacker will do the same thing, but they do it without permission, and their intent, of course, is to steal or ruin or take from the company.
So how do you feel about quote-unquote white hat hackers that do some of this stuff without permission, but then turn the information over to that's kind of a weird gray hat?
Yeah, so there's a gray hat area of this whole world, and it's a hard one to balance, right? Because and this is a big philosophical debate that you're getting me into, but like I'm one of those guys that I'm not 100% agreeable with what they call responsible disclosure, because I've seen a lot of my coworkers and friends do things like responsible disclosure, like disclosing a vulnerability that they found, and then they get in trouble for disclosing it. But if you cross that line where you don't just find a vulnerability, but you exploit it to prove that it's vulnerable, and then hurt a company, and then release it publicly to others who don't have the same moral structure that you do, that puts a company at some risk, and it could put the end user at risk, right? I mean, let's just say I found the POS vulnerability in Target, and I decided I'm going to put it on the web. Now, I didn't hack Target, but those group in Russia did, and now they stole all those all those credit cards. That even though I wasn't directly related, it was my work that made that possible, and that's not the case. That's not I'm not saying that's the case, because that's not the case. I did not find that vulnerability. But I want to make that really clear.
Please point that.
Yes, please. But the thing that's important to remember is that gray hat area could be tricky depending on what it is, right? Depending on what it is. I believe in it in the sense of, hey, we need to get these vulnerabilities out there so they can be fixed. And a lot of companies are notorious for not fixing vulnerabilities until there's a little bit of egg on their face and people are saying, look at this vulnerability. We're dealing with that with the airline industry right now. There's some major vulnerabilities in airline software, and they probably would have never taken action if there wasn't so much news and stuff on the vulnerabilities in the airline Wi-Fi networks that there is happening right now. But to take a plane out of the sky to prove your point, yeah, not, definitely not.
Well, I mean, what you're doing right now, what you just said, right, where you said there's a vulnerability, in a lot of cases that's enough. If you would say publicly, hey, these people have not addressed this, there's a vulnerability here, that's being, to me, that's being responsible, but you're not releasing the actual exploit itself.
Right, and there's a big difference, right? Because, again, you have people that won't have the same moral structure. But to me, one of the biggest defenses to any of these attacks is knowledge. I can't tell you how many times, I've sat in front of groups and people and told them about phishing, and they're like, what's phishing? And if you don't even know what kind of attacks exist, how can you possibly protect against them? So the first stage in any type of defense is knowing what type of attacks exist out there.
I have another potential philosophical question for you. So I don't mean to keep hijacking the conversation, but so we've talked a lot so far about things that can happen and things that the companies need to address. But then sometimes you will go. Sometimes it's not the companies can go too far. I don't know if too far with security is really a real thing in most cases, but how do you help make something secure without adversely affecting the experience of your honest users?
Yeah, and that's actually a good question, because there are companies that can go too far. Like, I once worked with a company that took password security really seriously, so they had a 30-day policy change. Every 30 days you had to change your password, and it was like a minimum of, I think it was 15 characters with upper, lower case, and special characters. Now you're thinking, a person needs to come up with a brand new 15-character password that involves upper, lowercase, and special characters every 30 days. So what people were ending up doing is, like, there was a guy in the company who his favorite team was the Dallas Cowboys. So he would put the Dallas Cowboys, exclamation, exclamation, and then the month, so 01. And then the Dallas Cowboys, exclamation, exclamation, 02. And and you just couldn't reuse a password in 4 months. So by the time the 12th month hit, he can go back to 01, and it was okay. And this was his method of coming up with a password that met all the requirements, but it was so easy to guess because he would take it and write it on a sticky note. So this is the way we found it. It was at the bottom of his keyboard on a sticky note, and I tried the one that was like Dallas Cowboys 04, and it didn't work. And I'm like, let me just try 05. 05, done, worked, because it just was the next month, and he just changed it, right? So sometimes in an effort to remain secure, companies can get overly zealous, and then it could hurt security. So there's a balance, and it's hard to say what that balance is here because it really depends on your culture, the information that you release, what type of work that you do. You know, if you're a nuclear facility, I'm all for getting hardcore enough to make things difficult even on your employees, as opposed to, if you're a paper company and you don't really do too many dangerous things. You could be, I'm not saying more lax, but you don't have to be as hardcore as a nuclear facility. So I think, depending on what you do and where your organization is, that you have to decide with your security vendor what's the best practices for making yourself and your employees secure.
One of my most favorite episodes of your podcast was episode 64 with John McAfee, right? And
That's
the
awesome,
reason,
isn't he?
yeah, oh my God, he's
Yeah.
hysterical. Great knowledge. Really interesting. But I didn't realize how bad it is for mobile phones. Like when he went off about that. So just to recap for that, when we developed for mobile, because we do a lot of cross-platform, hybrid apps, native apps for these phones and these mobile devices, how can we help the security of that? Because for those, I know most of our listeners have not heard that episode, and hopefully I'm going to put it in the show notes so people can actually listen to it. But basically, your mobile phone is so insecure, and we all, like, anytime you download an app, this was one thing that stuck with me from that episode. What do you do when they say, do you accept all of this criteria? We want to access your microphone. We want to access this. We want to access that. You say yes. You don't even read it. You just go yes, right? And update, yes, no problem. So we're so, like, in tune with thinking that we're so safe on these phones. How can we help that without, as Danny said, hurting our user experience?
That's a hard one. I don't know if I have an answer to it, because as a user, what I tell people all the time is think about what the app is asking you. So I'm downloading a calculator. Why does a calculator need access to my contacts, my GPS software, and my my microphone? It doesn't. So I'm going to go find a different calculator. No, I don't accept your policies. Erase, and I'm going to go find a different one. If I'm downloading a dumb game, why does a dumb game need access to my contacts? No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let you spam all my friends and family because I downloaded this game. So no, I'll go download something else. And you have to think through as the end user, because I think making a policy change for a company standpoint, companies aren't going to do it, because think about it, if I'm giving out a free app, how am I making money? It's through ads. It's through ads, and it's through the sale of marketing. So now a big company will pay me and say, look, I'm going to give this app away for free or 99 cents, but for $1 million you could put your ad in here, and everyone will have to click the ad to get to the game. Are you okay with that? And people pay tens of thousands of dollars or whatever to put their ads in these games, and that's how they make their revenue. Well, if as an end user we stop accepting that as a norm, I'd rather pay 99 cents for an app that I want, even a dumb little calculator, and have no ads, than get the free one that is laden with ads. and that I have to give access to my GPS contacts and microphone. I'd rather just get an app, right, that allows me to do what I want and not have to give all that access.
Mobile websites are, I think, are also particularly bad about some of this because like I'll be flipping through my Twitter feed or whatever, and there'll be like there'll be a news article posted or whatever. Almost every single time you go to a news website on your mobile phone, it pops up asking if it can use your location.
Yeah.
I mean, I always click no because I'm like, this ends up being an article based out of Denver somewhere. I'm like, why do you need this? You don't. They're just hoping enough people click yes. They can, so like they're gathering metrics and all that kind of stuff.
Well, think about it. There was a big thing on man, what app was it? I think it was Foursquare or one of those apps. It was a few years ago where when you checked into a place and it grabbed your GPS location, you would get coupons for restaurants in the area. So if I checked into Starbucks on Main Street, there was a geo app that would say, "Oh, he's here on Main Street in Anywhereville, USA. Quick, send him some coupons. Hey, you want some seafood? Bam! Here's some seafood coupons for a local restaurant." And it was all based on our location, so we would now get marketing that was specific to exactly where we were, and companies would pay tons of money for that because it increased the traffic into their restaurants like 7-fold, because it's like I'm in the area, I'm on vacation, I don't really live here, and now I get a coupon for $20 off on this restaurant. I'll go check it out. Just bring your phone in. And our phones became a mobile marketing device. Genius from a marketing standpoint, but also vulnerable from a security standpoint, because that means now all I have to do is pay a little money to Foursquare. And I'll give you an example of what we thought. We never did this because it was just an idea to explain how vulnerable this was. But in New York City, you saw all these posters that would have these little barcodes on it. So you want this ad on anti-smoking or whatever, and if you scan the barcode, you get a free app and it can help you with something. Well, people were going around the city taking stickers and putting them over the barcodes, and it was a barcode that led to a malicious website that installed malware on your phone. So if it was like Android sticker, Apple sticker, and they just had 2 different types of malware, and a guy would walk up to the ad, go, "Hey, I want that free app." Bam, go scan the barcode, and now you were allowing malware on your computer, thinking it was an HBO app or whatever, and it wasn't. It was some malware-ridden piece of software. That type of thing with like the Foursquare geo-feeding could be the same way. You pay a little fee. You get into this program where you can geo-feed people, and now all of a sudden you have, hey, click this link to get a coupon at a local restaurant. People click the link. They trust it because it came from their phone, from their Foursquare app, and it fed them malware. And you think about just what happened this week is Career Builder is found to be vulnerable because what's happening is people are going on and looking for jobs at major corporations, and they're applying for the job and uploading a resume that is full of malware. And now the company is getting the resume, right? So they're getting hey, Chris is interested in the job. Let me open his resume in PDF format. And when they open it, it's actually an exploit, and the companies are getting exploited, and they're not having to even find the email address of the targets. They're doing it through Career Builder website. So it's kind of thinking through those secure practices also in that kind of coding and development, to say that shouldn't be allowed. Documents should be scanned. So if there's any type of abnormality or weird code in it, it's rejected, and not passed on to the end user.
Yeah, because that whole mindset for companies to say that we're smarter than that, that's really going to hurt us.
Yeah.
It's really going to hurt us.
It is. It is hurting us. Yeah.
Because and that just thinking about PDFs right now, because you can put a lot of nasty stuff into PDFs, or images even. You can hide a lot. You can hide some nasty code in images as well. We actually had this is not a hacking thing, but we actually had one of our designers break one of our front end builds because he gave us some SVGs and we run everything through like SVGmin and things like that, and there was like some leftover like metadata. You didn't export them correctly, and there's some leftover metadata, and so when it hit that part in the code, everything broke. But the idea is that you can do that. You could take, you could somehow replace, if you can somehow replace the logo, somewhere with something that has some bad stuff in it. And where do most people click when they want to go back home? They click on the logo. And you can hide this stuff in, especially like plugins that you use for your Chrome plugins and things like that.
Chrome extensions and the
they give you access to the DOM on a given page that you're on, which is one of the reasons they can do really cool things. But say you have a plugin that you try to get installed that's very specific for bank websites that replaces something, that just replaces a link. So just think about things when you're installing them, about exactly what they're doing and
exactly what they're asking from you.
Yeah.
And it's going back to like our identities and on the social aspect of it, like where for my email and for most of my accounts that I have that I use, Twitter and everything, I'll do whatever highest level of security there is. I have an app that generates like RSA type of codes for some of them. And like for social media though, like Danny and I are like hopelessly addicted. We're on there all the time. We have these profiles where we have all our information, our dog's name or whatever on there. So how do you still keep a social profile without, like you said, you have these stamps and the images that tell you where you are and when. You have like Twitter, you can just access their API and it says, oh, Obama left the building here, and if you want to, put a thing there, then go ahead, do that. Right. There's like things that are pretty crazy you can do with social media. So how do we still maintain that profile, to some degree, and without sacrificing security?
Here's what I tell people: is that social media is not the issue; it's the usage of it without thought. So some companies are like we have Facebook and we have Twitter and we have LinkedIn, and we use them all to promote our company. So knowing that means there's certain amounts of information I have to be aware are out there about me. And to do that, I need to make sure that I don't release or that I don't allow that information to become my vulnerability. So, like let's say that your dog's name is out there because you put it on Facebook. Then don't use that as one of the answers to your security questions, right? So
granted,
right, and that to me is the biggest thing. Think about what information you're releasing, and think about how you're releasing it, and how it can be used by an attacker. And if you think that an attacker can use it, then don't use it for a security question, right? And that to me is the big thought process for this kind of stuff, to make sure that you don't use it in a way that can lead to a breach. And if it's out there, to just think through it, right? I mean, I go back to Paris Hilton. I mean, if she knew her dog's name was out there, that should not be one of her security questions. If your first car, if you talked about how much you loved your first car, then don't use it as one of your security questions. If your third grade teacher was your favorite teacher and you wrote about her in your college thesis, don't use that as one of your security questions. Because anytime you use it, if it's out somewhere, someone can find it and use it against you. So
even if you delete it, so people should realize that.
Oh yeah, I mean, think about archive.org. The Wayback Machine. You may have heard of that. The Wayback Machine is a web project that caches and archives every web page on the internet. So you can go, and if you put something out there on a web page, it can be cached and it can be there, and someone can find it, even if you deleted it off your website. Google Cache saves things for years after they've been deleted from the web. So don't think just because you delete something it's gone. Many times I've seen documents on the internet that contain usernames and passwords. They've been deleted, so you click the link and it says 404, but you go back to Google and search for it, and you click the little green link with a down arrow and it says cached. Sure, I'll click on that, and bam, now you're in the cache version, which Google has saved for you.
We're bumping up against time here, Chris. I know you got to get going. There's one other question I wanted to ask you, was that, and I don't know if Danny has anything else, but you have a partnership with Dr. Paul Ekman, and for those out there who don't know who he is, if you've ever seen that show Lie to Me, it's loosely based on his work. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that's used in social engineering?
Sure. Well, again, it comes back to understanding how humans make decisions, and we are emotional creatures. We're emotional beings, and emotions govern much of our life. And the way that we make decisions, we make decisions on many Americans who vote make decisions on who to vote for and who they like more, not who sounds the best, right? We make decisions on what to buy based on emotional content of a commercial or a marketing ad. We decide on who we'll fall in love with and who not. Our heart decides that, all based on emotion, right? Things are very emotional based. So Dr. Ekman's work has taught people how to read the emotion that people are displaying in something called a microexpression, which is a 1/25th of a second facial expression that is a release of an emotion. It's a reaction to a reaction to an emotional trigger that we can't control, and they're universal across culture, gender, no matter where we are in the world. And that work over the last 60 years or so has been used by thousands of researchers and scientists to show how strong emotional connections and content are and how we communicate using emotion. Well, I met with him about 4 years ago and talked about taking his work and applying it to the security field, because it fascinated me to think about things like, and this is really dark and morbid, but somebody like Ted Bundy, how was he able to do the things that he did and get away with it? And people thought he was a nice guy. When he got arrested, some of the people were like, but he's such a great neighbor, he's such a good guy, how can he be this kind of person? You look at people like Victor Lustwig, who sold the Brooklyn Bridge like 8 times and broke out of jail with nothing but a window washing squeegee. These guys are. You look at their life and you say the greatest con men in history. How did they do their work? And a lot of times, not saying the only skill, but a lot of times, a lot of it had to be that people liked them and they felt comfortable with them. So if we can analyze how nonverbal body language and facial expressions are used in making people feel emotion towards us, and we understand that, and we're aware of it, then we can use it as a defense also. We can be aware that when we're being emotionally triggered. We can become aware of when, hey, why am I feeling so close to this person I just met? What is it about them? And if their requests start getting weird, then if we're aware of it, an alarm can go off and say, hey, I may be getting manipulated. I need to stop. So my second book was basically based on all of that. It was written with Dr. Ekman, and he reviewed it. He was my reviewer and my scientific editor, and we went through the process of all the facial expressions of body language and how it affects us on an emotional level and influences us.
That was released last year, I think, right?
That was released last year, yeah.
Yeah. I still have to catch up. I got to read that one.
Yeah. That's like, I mean, it's a hard. I think it's such a specific book. It's not as broad and general as my first one, and that's why the first one seems to get a lot more interest, because it's very broad and it covers all of social engineering. And the second one is just for those who are really interested in body language. But it's not just about scams and con men. It's really a communications book and how we can use nonverbal body language and facial expressions to communicate better.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So
sounds awesome.
If people want to find out more about you or contact you about social engineering, what's your Twitter handle? Where can people get you?
So my personal Twitter handle is @HumanHacker. We have a corporate Twitter handle, which is SOC Engineer Inc. Websites are social-engineer.org and social-engineer.com. So on the .org, we have the podcast and the newsletter, and there's contact forms. People can. I'm not too difficult to find. So if anyone's got specific questions, if they can find me, you can feel free to email, and we usually are pretty open to helping in conversations and things like that.
Well, thank you so much for coming. It's been really educating, as always.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun having a chat with you guys.
Yeah, and definitely for those of you who haven't listened to the podcast, it's been out since 2009, and every month one new one comes out, so check it out, social-engineer.org.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
No problem. We'll see you guys again.
Yeah.